So if you would, go over to the book of Daniel with me this morning, chapter 2. We're going to be continuing our trip through these first 7 chapters as we move on together. And today we're resuming the story of Nebuchadnezzar's dream, Daniel's vision, and God's wisdom revealed. And this story began with a troubling dream, one that Nebuchadnezzar took to heart as a message from beyond this world. He didn't dismiss it as an invention of his imaginations, but as some kind of divine omen of something that was going to happen. And he had to have an answer to what that was. So he called together the best of the best in his court, every expert he had, and challenged them to interpret this dream using every means at their disposal. But he would not tell them what it was first. He had to be sure that they were going to tell him what he needed to know, not just what he wanted to hear. He had to make sure that this interpretation they gave him of this dream was true and right. But his request was beyond their ability to answer, and so they pleaded for mercy. But in his rage, Nebuchadnezzar had none of that and ordered them all to be killed. And when the guards came to Daniel and his friends in the final year of their training, Daniel asked for the king some time to seek God's answer to the king's request. So Daniel and his friends prayed, and God answered Daniel in the middle of the night. He sent him a vision, an interpretation of this dream. And that's where we left off last week. We looked at Daniel overcome with the reality of what he saw and how he prayed to the God in the heavens, praising his name, his power, and his wisdom. And when he reached the end of his praise, he approached Arioch, the very guard who came to kill him, and he asked of him to seek an audience with the king. And so he's brought before Nebuchadnezzar, and Arioch tells him that he's brought him an answer at last. And so Daniel delivers this vision, this message, a message of kingdoms rising and falling, of human strength and frailty, and of a sovereign God who reigns over it all. And so this morning, as we work through this dream, we're going to see 2 aspects out of this vision. And we start in verse 31 with number 1, kingdoms fall. If you look down at verse 31, I'm reading out of the Christian Standard Bible if you have it on an app on your phone or something like that. We're going from verse 31 to 35. It says, "Your Majesty, as you were watching, suddenly a colossal statue appeared. That statue, tall and dazzling, was standing in front of you, and its appearance was terrifying. The head of the statue was pure gold, its chest and arms were silver, its stomach and thighs were bronze. Its legs were iron, and its feet partly iron and partly fired clay. As you were watching, a stone broke off without a hand touching it, struck the statue, and on its feet of iron and fired clay, and crushed them. Then the iron, the fired clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were shattered and became like chaff from the summer threshing floors. The wind carried them away, and not a trace of them could be found. But the stone that struck the statue became a great mountain and filled the whole earth." So now we finally know the mysterious dream. The first part of this secret has been revealed, and if this were a modern courtroom drama, this would be the part where the detective comes out and he reconstructs the crime. And he does it in front of the witness, telling him where he was, what he was doing, maybe what he was wearing, all on the night this crime took place. And he's laying it out in this procedural way. And this statue stands before Nebuchadnezzar as the scene he lays. And it's demanding his observation. And so he looks up and he sees the various metals that make up the figure and the clay at the bottom. And as he watches, a stone comes down and the entire thing is disintegrated with a single strike at its weakest point, turning it to dust and blowing it away. And then the stone gets bigger and it becomes a mountain, and that dwarfs the statue because it covers the entire land. And then the dream is over. But unlike dreams that we have, which are often consumed with waking like the stone that grew to a mountain, this dream, it remained, it lingered like a ghost throughout the night, troubling Nebuchadnezzar. He knew it meant something, but what could it mean? Well, Daniel answers, this was the dream. Now we will tell the king its interpretation. And so we pick up in verse 37. Your Majesty, you are the King of kings. The God of the heavens has given you sovereignty, power, and strength and glory. Wherever people live, or wild animals, or birds of the sky, he has handed them over to you and made you a ruler over them all. You are the head of gold. And after you, there will arise another kingdom, inferior to yours, and then another, a third kingdom of bronze, which will rule the whole earth. A fourth kingdom will be strong as iron, for iron crushes and shatters everything. And like iron that smashes, it will crush and smash all others. You saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's fired clay and partly of iron. It will be a divided kingdom. Though some of the strength of the iron will be in it, you saw the iron mixed with the clay, and that the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly fired clay. Part of the kingdom will be strong, and part will be brittle. You saw the iron mixed with clay. Peoples will mix one with another, but will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with fired clay. So basically, breaking it down, Nebuchadnezzar is what he tells him. You are part of this dream. God has made you the head of gold. He's made you a king over other kings, even my king, the king of Judah. Now this Nebuchadnezzar knows he overthrew Judah and its king. He took out the puppet government that Egypt had set up. He laid waste to Jerusalem. He even had taken a pass at Egypt, but that didn't work out for him. He knew the power that he had. But Daniel was careful to remind him of where that power came from. God has made you a ruler over them all. But it will come to an end. Daniel continues with that very key phrase, one I really wants to focus on this morning, in verse 39. After you. In power, this is a fact that kings and rulers often forget. Their power will come to an end. There will always be an after. This is something our world seems to have really kind of forgotten as well. There will be an after. Our lives and all we acquire are temporary. And no matter how powerful, no matter how wealthy, no matter how esteemed, there will come a day when you are no more. There always will be an after. You could set things up to live very comfortably, to rake in wealth, to continue to consolidate power, to gather influence, but there will be an after. Kind of like when you borrow money and you get those 90 days, no payments, there's an after to that. When you get that interest-free term for 12 months, but your minimum payment, of course, goes for 24 months, there's an after. In the last few weeks, we've seen in our world the after. We've seen several pop culture celebrities passed away, and we noticed one thing. They left behind wealth, they left behind fame, they left behind stories and media empires, but now they're gone. That wealth, it didn't go with them. The fame, they didn't take it. The influence that they have on our media and culture, now that's part of history. There is always an after. Alexander the Great, thinking back, conquered the world, but there was another after him. Rome built monuments and roads and empire, roads that still exist and work today, and long after Rome has faded, the British Empire has left bits and pieces of itself behind all over the world after their conquest. Our own country, the United States, 249 years, accomplished a lot on the world stage. Advances in technology, advances in industry. But as long as Jesus holds off coming back, there will be an after for this place too. Europe, as strong as it is in history and culture, will have an after. The things men build are not eternal. Everything must pass away. No matter how strong, no matter how indelible or how important, it will not last. The only thing we seem to be really good at making last forever is plastic. Kingdoms rise, yes, absolutely. But all kingdoms must fall. This is inevitable. And Nebuchadnezzar, like us, must come to terms with the fact that everything has an expiration date. It's just a matter of time. Daniel says that there are 4 kingdoms total that make up this statue. And scholars are divided on exactly which 4 kingdoms these are, but however, I don't think that's the main point in this chapter of what Daniel's talking about. Now, because what often happens when people discuss these 4 kingdoms is they scoot forward to Daniel chapter 7 and gather it and kind of drag it back here to Daniel 2. And I kind of think that's putting the cart before the horse. And when we tend to do that, we're losing the primary meaning of this dream. Now, we will deal with all that when we get over to Daniel chapter 7, but we're not going to deal with that right here. I don't think that was what Daniel wanted to focus on. And one writer put it this way, and I like it. He says, the focus of the dream itself and its interpretation are more concerned with what the future holds than when it will come to pass. The kingdoms, exactly who they are, is inconsequential, because all of these will rise and they will fall. And for that reason, we won't be speculating at this time. He only identifies 2 kingdoms here. 1, Babylon, and 2, God's kingdom. So the what of this dream is that all these kingdoms have an after. They will fall. Now, it's here we could take the pessimistic viewpoint and wonder, well, what's the point? Why labor for a world that will just fall apart? Why seek good in a world that's passing away? And well, frankly, it's that attitude that's led to untold damage to our planet and our bodies. It's destroyed lives, it's destroyed our health. And no matter how hard we can try, sometimes there are certain things we have done that cannot be undone in our pursuit of wealth and power. We have been the agents of our own destruction throughout all of our history, and it seems to be repeating itself all over again. What then are we to do with our after? Well, the dream isn't quite over yet. Because just as these kingdoms fall, as all kingdoms must, there's a seed of hope being sown here, a rock untouched by human hands that will bring forth among falling kingdoms, number 2, a kingdom to come. And we go to verse 44. It says, in the days of those kings, the God of the heavens will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed. And this kingdom will not be left to another people. It will crush all of these kingdoms and bring them to an end, but will itself endure forever. You saw a stone break off from the mountain without a hand touching it, and it crushed the iron, bronze, fired clay, silver, and gold. The great God has told the king what will happen in the future. The dream is certain, and its interpretation reliable. So to finish this vision comes a 5th kingdom in the face of the 4. One that's different from all the others, as it's not made of some sort of metal, it's not fashioned or shaped, but it's uncarved. No hand has touched it. And it's not that the stone was fashioned to destroy the statue, which was represented those 4 kingdoms, but that untouched, it had the same power needed to destroy them. It was made to do those things. It was ordained to do those things. This 5th kingdom, the one that comes from no man, is somehow strong enough to break into pieces these kingdoms with feet of clay, powerful enough to bring all of it to an end. After all these kingdoms comes one that will never end. In the face of the fragility of these earthly kingdoms, this kingdom from God stands firm. And just as the God of the heavens has placed Nebuchadnezzar as this golden head over those kingdoms, so also now the God of the heavens has made a new kingdom which does not have an after. Now, the odds are that neither Daniel nor whoever wrote down this portion of Daniel through the ages had any idea what it was truly talking about. Messianic prophecy was still very much in its infancy in terms of their understanding at this point. But even though Daniel and the first readers of this book did not know it, we, with providential hindsight, can see that God knew what he was doing all along. He was preparing a way for a kingdom unlike any other, a kingdom that will not just stand in place like a statue made with hands and feet of fragile clay, but this kingdom will be built like a mountain, untouched by man, that will grow and it will fill until one day it will reach every corner of the earth. And it's this vision of kingdom come, a kingdom that came through a stone that was unmade by human hands, a stone that builders will reject, a rock that will fall upon all and are crushed by, and those who run to it will be given shelter in the storms of this world, a rock that living water flows out of, quenching the thirst of all who seek it. This kingdom stands even in the after of every worldly kingdom. This kingdom grows even in the after of our greatest accomplishments. This kingdom remains when all else is turned to dust. This is the kingdom that God brought through one who did what the nation of Israel could not do. This is the kingdom that's the reversal of the fall, the one who's the last Adam, the one who stands in the place of God's people, doing all that they were called to do. This is the one who took the way of death to bring us the way of life, who was crushed for our iniquities so he could crush the powers of sin, death, and hell in the grave. This is the kingdom that is grown by men and women walking in his ways, born again by his Spirit, bringing healing and life to a world filled with darkness and death. This is the kingdom that was told long before they even understood what it meant, but we stand in today. For Daniel and his fellow exiles, this was a hope that God was not done yet. They may not have known exactly what it was talking about, but they knew that even though it looked to all the world that God had failed his people, they knew his kingdom would not fail. They knew that God was not done with his work in humanity. He was not done with his renovation of the world. They knew God is the one who sets kingdoms in place, and he is the one who crushes them to dust. He is the one who gives power to those who rules, even if they are wicked. But wickedness does not reign forever. That hope that they had out of this vision as exiles, and we now have as exiles in this world. Because we may be surrounded by corruption and wickedness. We may be overcome by negativity, by hatred and prejudice. We may feel as if we're kept firmly under the heel of feet of clay. But we have that same hope that Daniel had, that there's a kingdom near at hand, a kingdom that will have no end. How grounded in that hope are you? One of the problems that has led to the mess we have seen in the evangelical world is when the church got in the business of empire building. Because we didn't take to heart that all empires fall. And they typically fall when they're built on people with feet of clay. How many big name preachers, pastors, celebrity guys, church leaders have fallen just in the last 3 years? Through financial scandals, sexual sin, you name it. Being, frankly, a jerk to their staff instead of a shepherd. Through abuse of their flock. How many have fallen? You can count them again. When we got in the business of empire building, we forgot where we need to really put our hope at. When we started flirting with the world to secure our place of security, to gather more influence, gather more power, gather more wealth, gather more respectability, we lost our place. You know, it says in the Psalms, put not your trust in princes, but trust in the Lord. Don't put your hope in all that. And friends, because here's the truth that we got to remember. You may be an American by birth or citizenship or immigration, however you came here. I got to say that because Clive's in the back. But this nation will fall one day. It will. And all that has been put into it will fall away. But here's your hope. You may be a citizen by birth or immigration status or whatever here, but you are also a citizen of God's kingdom by new birth. And Jesus doesn't need to check your papers, by the way. It will fall as all empires must, but you belong to a kingdom that will have no end. You may look around and be discouraged and tired and worn out by what you see. You may be sick and tired of death, pain, suffering, war, disease, and animosity that surrounds us and we can't stop hearing about, we can't get away from. But there will be a day when all of that is swallowed up by a kingdom that's like a mountain that will fill the earth, rising above all of it. And in the face of darkness, there is hope in God's kingdom because the dream is certain and its interpretation is reliable. The question then is this: which kingdom are we investing in? Are we pouring ourselves, as one writer says, into the pursuit of the power and the glory of this world's kingdoms, a power and glory that must inevitably decay and topple into obscurity? Or are we instead pouring ourselves into the pursuit of God's kingdom, the only kingdom that will truly last? Now, to be very clear, this is not to say go hide in a cave and spend all your time around your books to invest in God's kingdom. That's not what that means. That's not what that means at all. You can do good here and now and be investing in God's kingdom. Because I don't know about you, but when I read the Gospels, that's all I see. Jesus spent his time with the Father and his relationship with God in prayer, but he also spent a lot of time out there doing good among people, building God's kingdom. He even paid his taxes. He was a good citizen too. In Daniel's case, God put him in a position to do a lot of good. It says in verse 48, then the king promoted Daniel and gave him many generous gifts. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and chief governor over the wise men of Babylon. And at Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to manage the province of Babylon, but Daniel remained at the king's court. So Daniel served the king. He was in a position in a worldly government, in an earthly empire. But though he served the king, he first served God's kingdom. Daniel and his friends did good in Babylon, but they did not belong to Babylon. Make sense? So what does that look like for us? Because we live in a very different world. Well, think about it this way. What are you known for? If you're known more for your stances than your kindness or your compassion, there's probably a problem. If you're known more for your wealth and power than your generosity and compassion, then you may have a problem. If you're known more for, don't throw a stone at me, if you're known more for being a patriot than a Christian, then there's a problem. Now, I'll leave that fine line of wherever that is up for your debate. All I'll say is this: here's the deal. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. Everything else just falls into place. There's a lot of chatter going on both sides about the future of the country, and there's one side there's fear, the other side there's joy. I don't get into all that. There's hope, there's despair, depends on which side of the aisle you're on. And to both sides, I'll just say this. If you want to see change, you need to shift your focus away from the horizontal and back onto the vertical. Because if you don't like the way things are going, give it a few years, it'll change. That's the one constant in this world is change. So instead of getting tied up in all that, seek those things which are above. And be the change you want to see instead of being tossed and turned by every new wave of change and news. Fix your anchor on that rock unmade by human hands, and you'll find a resting place there. You can do all you're called to do as a person living in this world and invest in God's kingdom at the same time. There's people in this room here who do that. You know, who has a chaplain for their company? I know someone in here who does. Who prays at a closing of a real estate deal? I know some people who did. I was there, I saw it. Who goes around and works with the homeless and prays with them? I know people who do. Who speaks a good word over their contractors when they need to hear it? I know someone who does. We can do good where we are, when we are, because God uses us where we are to accomplish his purposes. He's building a kingdom, even in the midst of kingdoms that are going to fall. Nebuchadnezzar was the head of gold. All of that was going to shatter one day. So what does Daniel do? Well, he doesn't sit on his hands. It says he serves the king. It says that he and his friends become heads of state, and they try to make good lives for the people around them. They both serve the king but belong to God. There's a way to do this. We are part of a kingdom in the midst of another kingdom. We're exiles, pilgrims, who, like Jeremiah told these exiles, build houses, grow families, live good lives, take care of each other, dig in roots, and seek the good of our neighbors. In the midst of kingdoms rising and kingdoms falling, there's a way to bring the two together. The good we do in the midst of the kingdom we live in grows a kingdom that will have no after. God will use you where you are, just as he used Daniel and his friends. And as we move forward in this kingdom of clay, what are we looking for? We're looking to the horizon for the mountain of God's kingdom that will one day fill the earth. And we're doing that by simply trusting him and obeying him. Amen?